I am so excited about this next panel, and it's a great follow-on to the other sessions we've already participated in. But before I start, just a couple of things. I want to first underscore Paige's commitment to DE&I and justice. I think you see that on display today, but this isn't new for us. We are very fortunate to have the leadership of Cheryl Battles and Rochelle Ford over our DE&I committee. Cheryl and Rochelle are trailblazers, and we're fortunate to have their time, their commitment, and their dedication. So thank you very much to both of you. I also want to put in a little bit of a plug for the Diversity Action Alliance, which, as you know, is a coalition of PR and communications leaders who have joined forces to accelerate progress in the achievement of meaningful and tangible results in DE&I across our profession. So the DAA is not about the why, it's the what and the how, which leads me to our guests. We have Jennifer Temple from Hewlett Packard Enterprise and Torod Neptune from Lenovo. Thank you both for being here. So our goal today is to give members practical ways to jumpstart their DE&I efforts. Right, we all know the time to talk is over, it's time to act. So let me stop talking and let you all talk on the panel. So Torod, let me start with you. So Lenovo is not new to this journey, but what can you share that will be helpful to our members to help them achieve meaningful change in their organizations?
Yeah, thanks, Charlene. It's great to be a part of this discussion today. And to your question, I'd say maybe to kick things off, I think we found, and I have found personally as a leader over the last couple of years, that the most significant role that I can play in helping move this cause along from rhetoric to something real and sustainable in terms of its impact is by leveraging one of the more significant strategic priorities that my organization drives, which is agency engagement. And so we all appreciate that as a significant vehicle tool for us. And so we started out almost 2 years ago, making a decision that was fairly interesting at the time, but it was the decision to mandate that agencies to work with us had to commit to certain data that was provided and shared. That's namely diversity staffing, not just for our business, but for their agencies at large. And that effort was designed to influence the pursuit of agencies, but also beyond the actual initial engagement, really to manage how we calibrate our ongoing maintenance of agency relationships as well. And so I do think, to your question, that has probably been one of the more significant, although not the sum total of everything that we've done, but one of the more significant levers as a CCO that I determined to use and to activate to really put a stake in the ground around what I think most of us will appreciate, which is fundamentally this issue is not going to get dealt with in a substantive way until the people who control the dollars decide that we're going to be adamant about some of these things changing. And so we made a fairly public and vocal effort to do that.
And how did that go when you all first started? And has it been delivering the results that you had intended?
I think, so initially, I think there was a little bit of discussion, a little bit of debate. Obviously, we committed early on that this would be confidential data shared between us, even though since then we all have seen the publicly shared data. But again, I'd say almost to an agency, and we began with a fairly large group and then worked through over a period of weeks an evaluation cycle to get to the agencies that had the most compelling data in terms of actual progress that they were making and that leadership had committed to. So I think that went well. I think, to your point, more significantly beyond that moment and that decision, the real opportunity has been the ongoing engagement and focus both on the agency side and within my team to look at that data consistently ongoing, through quarterly reviews that we have today with our agencies. And then more importantly, the partnership that I think is even more critical, right? So it's not just about the data and seeing the data and having that presented. It is the ongoing maintenance and building of this kind of collaborative, cohesive approach to solving the problem. We actually had a meeting earlier today with the CEO of our largest agency globally to really talk about some of the specific programmatic things that we're looking at doing together, do a little bit of a review of their progress internally against, their individual diversity and KPI metrics, not just for our business, but for the agency at large. And so I do think not to put all of the attention on the process of selecting and hiring an agency, but the ongoing accountability and engagement around the statistics and the real meaningful results is just as important. And that's where I think Zeno, for us, and Barbie and her team have been great partners in that stead as well. And that's a big area as well.
Great, thank you. I'm going to come back to you, but first let's hear from Jennifer. Jennifer, you've been working hand in hand with your team and HPE's executive committee to implement change that's rooted in action as well as in measurement. So talk to us a bit about what's up at HPE and what we can learn from it.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be with you all. It's a fabulous conference so far, and I'm really delighted to be here. We are smaller than Torod as a corp comms group, so the impact that I can make as a corporate communications group is smaller, but I really have looked at the significant impact that our team can make for the company at large. I think you all would agree that we're more needed as a function than ever before. That's both a significant opportunity and a significant responsibility. So where global communications for HPE has leaned in is really helping our leaders understand and appreciate the huge responsibility we have. And I actually think being as small as our team is, and then HPE being reasonably new, 5-year-old company created by the spin from HP Inc., we've had a chance to show people who we are, and we've had a chance to learn a lot in what we've attempted to do and experimented with. So a couple of reflections that have been born out of this experience for me. One, I have really appreciated the opportunity to help our team create the space for dialogue. And that has been led by our CEO. He's been front and center. He has declared where we've stood on these issues. He has taken the microphone and been very open and transparent about where we have work to do. While we're proud of the results that we have in terms of our diverse representation, we know that 6% of our workforce being Black is not enough. We know that 32% of our workforce being diverse overall is not enough. We know that 32% of our workforce being women is not enough. So he's been very out in front in declaring that we need to do more. He's created a diversity and inclusion council that he himself chairs, and he also expects every member of his executive committee to be a member of at least one employee resource group that is one that we don't identify with. So for instance, I am a member of the Young Employee Network and talking to our younger generation members about what's on their minds. We have facilitated training that we've opened up. It started as SVP level training, and now it's for all people managers that has been mandatory by November 1st on inclusive leadership and having courageous conversations. We've stood up an advocacy effort where we've invited a book club experience for all of our team members to come and discuss topical books, White Fragility, How to Be an Anti-Racist, Little Fires Everywhere. We've had these monthly discussions where we lead through and share stories and talk about what we're personally going to commit to as advocates. And we've done things like revising and reintroducing social media guidelines about how to have these conversations, how to get started, how to make people feel comfortable and supported in sharing their stories, but also feeling empowered that they have the right guidelines to help with those. So, it started with sort of having this openness to the dialogue and to championing the dialogue. And then we've been very deliberate about making sure that diversity is represented in all the content we produce. So everything from every all team member meeting, having a diverse voice where people can hear diverse talent across the enterprise speak to our equity narrative and our business acumen and our growth trajectory, so that we're showing the diverse voices that it will take to help grow our business. And we take that as communicators very responsive. That's a responsibility we have to bring that and inject it into our content. Another thing I've been really proud of is eliminating discriminatory language across the enterprise when we spot it. So we've engaged on this historical technical nomenclature that exists, particularly in the coding environment. And we have eliminated master slave, blacklist, whitelist, and replaced it with other things. So those are just a few of the things that we got going on immediately, so that we as communicators could help the enterprise be stronger.
Right. Well, I think that sounds like more than just a few, but thank you very much for sharing it. We've all worked, we're either in agencies or for those of us who are in corporate, we've all been through some kind of drill around DE&I in the past. And so we all know that this feels different. But for our members now, as we're trying to do something different and really make a difference, what advice, and this is for both of you, what advice do you have for handling roadblocks, and specifically, I guess when I say roadblocks, people who focus on performative efforts and think they're actually doing something, but in actuality aren't really doing anything. So how have the two of you handled that within your organization, if it's been an issue?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think in this environment, it's one of the things that I think all of us have probably been challenged to help our organizations understand and organize around. And this is where I think, I had a former CEO boss who used to always say, words matter, but results matter more. And I think the strength of the collective roles that we play as page members in an organization, the power that resides within our roles and responsibilities is significant. I find most often my peers, from my perspective, are probably perhaps not activating the power that's inherent in our positions. And so I think, to your point, I find my colleagues to be well-meaning, and I think particularly in this environment, it is seldom for lack of desire that progress is not made here. And so I've tried to address where there's been a lack of clarity or reticence by being very vocal, very direct, and very upfront, not just in educating, but also in sharing the perspective that my organization is taking to lead and drive for results in this environment. And I do think the receptivity to that is much higher, certainly today, than it might have been in the past. And I think it really is just boiled down to, I often say, having the heart and the commitment as a leader to cast a shadow over an organization in a way that I think this environment invites and gives us the ability to take that we've not had in the past. And so I do think that direct conversation, that very authentic, frank conversation, is the only way to get around that.
Right.
I love all of those points, and I would maybe add to them a couple things. It seems like there is trepidation when people feel paralyzed because they don't know what to do, or they're afraid of doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing. So I think in addition to that authenticity call and everything you just said, Torod, I would say sometimes we just need to give people new tools. I referenced those social media guidelines. We were finding that people wanted to share that they were getting involved or being advocates or, helping further the agenda, but they were worried about what could be perceived as optical activism. Are they just putting something on their LinkedIn profile to make themselves look good, or are they actually furthering the conversation? And so by giving people some tools about what questions do you ask before you make those posts, why are you furthering that content? Who is it supporting? What are you hoping the outcome is? Just giving some people some comfort so that they can have the dialogue and they can be part of the conversation. has been a big piece that we've focused on. And then I also think clear roles and responsibilities when it is a little murky or it is ambiguous as to who has the ball, when a quick response is needed to react to something, decisions have to happen on the fly. So I think just really being clear on how to drive forward so you don't miss the opportunity to say something has been another guiding light.
I mean, the other point, I think, I'm sorry. To say one other thing that, one of the things that my team and I often talk about is this perception that we've tried to create amongst our colleagues internally for the role that we play as the conscience of the company. And I think that's an appropriate, again, we've all in this, discussion and within Page at large probably used that to varying degrees to describe really at our highest and best use the roles we play within our organizations. And I think this example in particular is a moment where us delivering on that aspiration is even more critical than it has been in the past. And that requires sometimes having very uncomfortable conversations and being the person pushing or the organization pushing and prodding our leaders and our peers to behave or to lean in and to prove the metal that supports the commentary that we've all seen taking place in the marketplace. And I think the counter side of these great examples, Jennifer just gave several, is in some instances we do need to poke and prod and hold our leaders' feet to the fire around, now that we said the thing, we delivered the statement, let's show what that looks like. I will show that within my leadership organization, but as an organization, I also want to challenge us to ensure that we are showing up that same way as an authentic enterprise, to use Page vernacular here. And I think that's also just as important in this environment as well.
And be willing to admit where there still are gaps. I mean, I think this has really encouraged me to shine a spotlight on our own gaps and be willing to expose that vulnerability. So the push for transparency can't just be being transparent when we have finished something and we're really proud about it and we want to brag about it. It's that transparency about this isn't good enough and here's what we're doing about it. And, standing up on our I&D council, for instance, we're sort of running it like a board where there are 4 or 5 work streams and people who are directly accountable to reporting back to the full council and then ultimately to the full company. And it's not going to be perfect every quarter and every year, but to be able to show that path is really important. And we have to get our leaders comfortable with sharing the path instead of just the ultimate outcome when they feel like they've accomplished something.
Yeah.
Right. So, Torod, and I think both of you hit on this a little bit on, that, often people are well-meaning, but perhaps they aren't doing things that, are really making a difference, or they're well-intentioned. And, I quote my mother a lot, and I'm always reminded that that when I was younger, and I tell her, well, I intended to do this. And she'd say, Charlene, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So with that, as my backdrop, Torod, you recently wrote a great piece in PR Week that was certainly about our profession. It was quite passionate, and it was also personal. And one comment that you made in it, you said, we can no longer claim ignorance. So we are all either complicit or we just don't care. And I fear that the honest answer is the latter. That's just such a beautiful and a strong statement. But what do you want to see from our members when you were writing that to PR Week, but now talking with our members? What do you want to see from them?
Yeah, it was that I think that piece, in addition to just the general discussion over the last several months, I think has been insightful for me in terms of, if I think about even the most recent history, the last several years, I mean, so much of this discussion, and I hearken back to the first time I remember being a part of a discussion focused on diversity or the lack thereof in the industry, that was 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago. And the fact that we still are looking at this issue, where we are today, and the fact that there's been so little progress, and there has been progress, not to kind of do a blank slate here across the entire industry, but I do think by and large, when you look at where we sit today, we know almost everything there is to know about why this issue is an issue. The inability to deliver results, I think, has got to be problematic on a number of levels, because I often think about, again, as a leader, and not just a leader who is diverse, but as a business operations leader. And if I think about my history, both across agencies and within brands, and I mentioned this in the PR Week op-ed, I mean, if there were an issue that I could not, in the span of a number of years, deliver against, I think fundamentally I'd have to get to the point where I question the role, the influence, the impact that I have as a leader. And I think there's some of those same questions as an industry that we have to wrestle with. If we care about this issue and we've not been able to show progress over 25, 30 years, there's some more strategic questions I think we need to ask ourselves. And that is where I think we need to wrestle.
Thank you. We've had a question come in from Joe Cohen, and it's to both of you. Torod spoke on how he is partnering with his agency on ongoing maintenance of the firm's DE&I practices. Can you and Jennifer, Torod, you and Jennifer, share tips or best practices for CCOs on how to partner with their firms to drive meaningful progress?
Yeah, and so I'll mention a couple things, and then maybe Jennifer can stump in here too. And so that point that I made earlier on in terms of this process, where we started out with this mandate that we needed to see the data and have this very engaged conversation, has led to what is this ongoing collaborative, dialogue. The goal was not a got you moment, but to establish some real accountability. And so back to this discussion I alluded to a little earlier today, we are talking consistently, not just around the statistics, because we know what gets measured, get focused on, but also we're looking at the kind of collaboration between us as the client and our agency, our global agency partner, around what are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about doing together, so that both as an agency and as a brand, we are taking a stab at addressing this issue, both in terms of the staffing, the recruitment, the retention issues across my agency, and also across the internal organization that I lead today. And so it is much more collaborative. We've had some very frank, very direct, very open conversations, and we are in the process of beginning to do that across our entire agency portfolio. And so the other benefit to the last several weeks is, now that we have all of this data available to us in terms of the real performance, we're looking at connecting what is about another 30, 35 of our agencies around the world to what we know is, their performance there. And that's not just, again, not got you, but a collaborative, let's talk about how we hold hands and do this together. Because if we are truly committed to it, then we've got to look at how we begin to address the issues inherent in the data, as opposed to just being focused on the data itself. And so I think that ongoing partnership is just as key as the data and the measurement side of this as well.
Great.
Yeah, wonderful points. We have a fabulous partnership with Ketchum and have been recently undergoing a perception audit of our stakeholders. So when I joined 2 years ago, we did a benchmark of what do people think of us? Are we doing enough in many areas? And certainly one of those areas was overarching ESG, as well as diversity imperatives, et cetera. And so 2 years later, we're retesting that. So I think one of the big things we can work on together, across agency and corporate, is just making sure that we're constantly in touch with our stakeholders and whether what we're doing is deemed meaningful enough. Is it going far enough? Is it the type of change people are expecting of us across all stakeholder groups? And then recalibrating our plans. The second thing we've been engaged in are some executive communications, sort of a refresh on what each leader of our executive committee is standing for and speaking about and contributing to this national and global dialogue. And that's another place where we really rely on a partnership to help us ferret out what we can say that is unique and differentiated, and that will be well received by our stakeholders who expect, and understandably so, a lot from us.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. That was about the fastest 20 minutes that I felt in a long time. So I certainly could keep going, but I want to thank you, Jennifer and Torod, for joining us this afternoon and sharing some of your insights about what works and what doesn't and what you're trying so that people can really look at this seriously and implement things that are going to make a difference, because I do think that that's what we want to do in our profession in the near term, not just the long term. So I thank you for that. I also want to add in about the DAA before I turn it over to Becky. I really want to encourage our members to sign up for the DAA. It's not just about Paige. It is a collaboration with other professional groups. And last I checked, we had only about 10% of the membership signed up to the pledge. So please take a look at it. I'm sure you're going to hear soon from me or Roger anyway. But we would love to have you there, because this time is going to be different, right? It is going to be different. So thank you again for being on our panel.